Hey there, good evening. Nice to see you. It's time for the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program, you might know already, where we talk to reporters and writers and editors and journalists and find out what they're writing about the Bronx and especially what's behind what they're writing about the borough of the Bronx. We're going to do that in just a moment. And in our second segment, we're going to do a little bit of Bronx history. And we will get into one of the Bronx neighborhoods that's been selected for Sixth to Celebrate by the Historic Districts Council. But right now, let's get started. Let's do the journalist thing and say good evening to Holly Pretsky, who's the Deputy Managing Editor of City and State New York. Holly, nice to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so pleased to be here.
People probably know because some of your colleagues have been here. I am incredibly fond of City and State New York. I read it religiously, like so many of us who are interested in the political scene. I saw this cover page. I pulled it out of my mailbox, this headline, and I was like, wait a minute, it looks like the Inquirer. My job was to try and kill him. And this is the headline story, the front page story that Holly did for City and State New York. This is about, and I really had never heard it characterized this way, but apparently it's a whole industry, so to speak, of Oppo research, which is opposition research. Before we get into some of the specifics, what is opposition research and why did you think correctly this was a good story to do?
Yeah, well, first of all, credit to Stu Lozer for that amazing quote. My job was to try and kill him.
All right.
Bold, and as soon as he said it, I kind of exclaimed. I kind of was like, ah, I can't believe you just said that. But opposition research, when a person runs for political office, they often, if they have the budget for it, will hire a professional researcher to first look into their background and determine what their vulnerabilities are, whether they still owe taxes or they have an open speeding ticket or there's residency issues or they're being
Some other infidelity in their background.
yes, things like that. So they're trying to do defense and figure out what their vulnerabilities are, but the researcher is also hired to dig up dirt on the opponent as well and figure out, what the opponent's vulnerabilities are and how to highlight those for voters.
So even though in many of the political debates that I have done, and I've done more than 90 here in the borough of the Bronx, um, almost all the candidates will say we want to campaign positively. This is all about the people of the Bronx, et cetera, et cetera. But those candidates may have hired somebody to like keep it away from me, but dig up something about the opponent, put it out there, and of course, then it helps me because the opponent now looks smeared in some form.
Absolutely. Hiring a
I'm
researcher.
just telling it like it is, I guess. Go ahead.
Yes, hiring a researcher who gives the campaign negative information about their opponent. It gives the campaign the ability to pitch negative stories about the opponent to journalists, often on the condition of no fingerprints, meaning the journalist, if they accept the information, if they accept the tip or the research book, they have to agree that they are not going to say this
Not going
sounds.
to say where it came from.
Yes.
What really raised? Go ahead, finish what you was going to say.
It's I don't know that any journalist enjoys that decision, but a lot of times the
Wait, the
information,
decision to not tell their source?
yeah,
Well,
or to
nobody tells their
not
source.
reveal
Yeah,
where the
where it came
information
from.
came from, but this is common. You protect your sources, and a lot of times you do receive information on the condition that you don't expose where the information came from. And a lot of times opposition research does expose important information that voters should know.
There's no question about it. What really interested me is that it's not just a couple of candidates. There's a whole industry in this. This is done all the time, and you which certainly raised my interest. You mentioned a couple of Bronx elected officials. One of them was Elliot Engel, who was at his Maryland home during the lockdown, claiming that, like everybody else, he was, suffering the lockdown in New York. And then somebody took a picture of him on his porch. And the next thing you know, Jamal Bowman has been the congressman in that district. It just absolutely fascinating to me. Now, you mentioned Stu Loser, who also apparently was uh, chased after our friend Freddie Ferrer a little bit. And I don't really remember this. Of course, I was working on the air during the time that this happened. But let's see, the Mark Green campaign okayed flyers with racist anti-Ferrer cartoons that were sent to voters in Italian and Jewish areas of Brooklyn. But then Green himself denounced the flyers. It's just fascinating stuff. I mean, it's really double dealing in some ways, I guess.
Yes, I wasn't sure whether to include that. It felt like important context for the campaign, for what's happening with that campaign, but those flyers weren't themselves really opposition research because they were just political flyers that were sent to voters, and they were reprinting a political cartoon that depicted the Reverend Al Sharpton and then borough
I,
president.
I, I remember those actually.
Yeah,
Um,
and
the, well, then the one was Freddie Ferrer was called Fibbing Fernando. He said he
yes,
was educated in public schools and he actually went to Catholic schools. I mean, frankly, from those of
yeah.
us who know him well in the Bronx, know that that's actually the case. Um, it goes out there, and you've already addressed this, and I was going to ask you about it, is the whole notion of a journalist to then take that information. Is that the information people should be getting? You're a journalist. How hard do you negotiate with yourself over whether or not you should use it, or it's out there? We know it came from an Oppo researcher, but really, if it's reality, maybe the people should have the right to know it.
Yes, this is kind of the core question of the article. Does office
Yes.
research make our politics more toxic, or does it make our politics better because it's a way of vetting candidates? A lot of researchers noted that journalism is not exactly in its strongest in the strongest phase of its history. A lot of newspapers are shrinking or shuttering, reporters are being laid off, or they're working with fewer resources. So, from the researchers' point of view, they're saying, well, we're actually stepping in to fill an investigative void, and we're stepping in to vet these candidates as they should be vetted as part of a democracy. And so, we're actually doing a service to voters. There's some truth to that, I think. I think that's a valid perspective, but I think it's fair to be concerned about a political environment where we are only learning about these episodes from people's pasts or these questionable tweets that they deleted 10 years ago or whatever it may be. If there's a very clear motive, if the only reason we're learning about that is because someone else is trying to destroy them, and the word destroy comes up all the time when you talk about Oppo
Wow.
research.
That's
You know,
amazing.
yeah, is that
It's a
really?
nasty business.
Yes, it could kind of turn politics really ugly and maybe create a political environment where we're not focused so much on someone's ability to lead or govern and their real skills that apply.
Well, that is among the questions, is how relevant is
Right,
it that Freddie Ferrer tried to,
right.
position himself going to public schools when he didn't? I mean, to me, I mean, it's not that big a deal. And did that mean he was not qualified to be mayor? I mean, my goodness, how many things did any candidate actually say that weren't totally true? What you brought up, though, was fascinating to me because you talked about the climate for journalists, that they're being laid off. There's a lot of pressure to come up with stuff. If you want to be the one, you've got to have something nobody else has, and that helps you keep your job. So then maybe you may be more likely to run a story that you're saying, well, it's no big deal, but I can get a headline in the Daily News or in the New York Post out of it. Maybe it helps me keep my job. I mean, it's out there. I know probably both of us would always, favor lean in the side of journalists, but that could be reality as well.
I think that journalists, there's also the question, if someone comes to you and they bring you a negative story about a candidate and you decide not to run it, you're still making a choice. So in that case, you're then kind of protecting that
That's
candidate.
right. That's
Like,
right. Right.
so
So then, yeah,
watch
who are you to?
story, watching
Yeah,
chaos.
that's right. What
So
one of the other before we run out of time, I just want to bring this up. One of the other things that you brought up for failed opposition
mhm,
research was George Santos. That they said that he attended Baruch College, which of course they found later was false. The Oppo research on him didn't go far enough because it wasn't revealed till he was elected and later that he actually was, frankly, a total fraud.
yes, so that's a classic example, and that's what a lot of people will bring up for why they think Oppo is so important, because it failed so clearly in the George Santos case.
Mhm.
Um, the DN or the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, which is the national campaign apparatus for House Democrats, did put out Oppo research on George Santos, but I don't think they took him very seriously. I mean, he did not seem like a very formidable candidate.
A
So a lot of
formidable
the
opponent. Yeah.
Oppo, they didn't really dig super deep into his background. They flagged a few things for sure, and so did the Zimmerman campaign.
Right.
They've said many times that they were flagging, like, this guy's a fraud. But I think, there was a lack of awareness about the
Clearly,
real.
a lack of follow through.
Yeah.
Before we run out of time, I just want to ask you: is there a solution to this? Is this just the way it is? Is there an answer to this, or did you simply expose something so when we see negative stuff reported about a candidate, we have a better idea of where it comes from? Or is there, I don't know what you could do to rope it in? People can hire whoever they want, and now the information is out there. Find
I think
anything you want.
that you can't get rid of Oppo research. I think it serves sometimes an important role in our politics and in our democracy. I think the more people that understand how it works, the better, so that people can have that awareness. If they see a negative story pop up about something from deep in someone's past, they can have that awareness that maybe this came from someone with a motive. And then if we as journalists can figure out a way to be more transparent ourselves, sometimes we're not able to do so because of the conditions that are set by the tipster. And that's very common in
Yeah,
many
of
different
course. Don't
stories,
you,
but
you didn't hear this from me. I've heard that a few times. I'm sure. Anyway, Holly, we do got to go. Holly Pretsky, Deputy Managing Editor of City and State New York. As I said, I thought it was an eye opener. It was an education, and I'll be doing debates for the primary coming up in June, and I will have all of this in the back of my mind probably from now till forever. Thank you so much for the great work.
thank you so much for reading it so closely. I really
Of course, I
enjoyed
go
talking to you.
cover to cover every week. And best regards to Ralph and all my buddies over there. Okay, thanks so
Very well.
much, folks. We will take a short break. When we come back, as I said, we're going to do the history of one of the most important neighborhoods in the Bronx. They're all important, but this will be Bronx Park East. So don't go away. We'll be right back. Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. I'm thrilled with this segment because anything that designates our neighborhoods as being special is special to me and special to the people of the Bronx. So, right now, let's say a good evening to my friend Diego Robayo, who's the public relations specialist at the Historic Districts Council. Diego, always nice to see you.
Hi, Gary. Good to see you.
And our new friend is a board member of the Bronx Park East Community Association. It is Diana Finch. Nice to see you, Diana.
Nice to be here.
Great. Thanks for joining us. Diego, let's talk about Six to Celebrate. Historic Districts Council has taken this very seriously. Every year you select six New York City neighborhoods, and Bronx Park East was selected this year in the Bronx. But just in general, what is Six to Celebrate? Why is it, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, Gary. So the Six to Celebrate program is program that we've been executing since 2011. And basically, the goal of this program is to select six neighborhood groups every year. And we work with all these neighborhood groups in terms of preservation. We help them achieve their preservation agenda, their goals. We advise them on what routes they could take if they want to preserve the historic character of their neighborhood. And we usually tend to have groups from all over the city, and we like to select diverse range of groups in terms of locations across the city. So this year we're working with the Bronx Park East Association in the Bronx. We're also working with other groups in Manhattan, Queens, and Brooklyn. But this is going to be another of our Bronx groups that we're going to be working with. In the past, we've worked with the Garifuna Coalition, with the Bronx History Forum, with many groups in the Bronx. And our main goal is to help them and advise them on how they can achieve their preservation goals.
Are you ever surprised with like how many areas there are in the city that need this kind of designation, that or deserve this kind of designation, that, let's face it, you're never going to run out? But I'm sure that you get applications and you say, wow, this is a beautiful neighborhood. Oh my goodness, this is a beautiful neighborhood. And you know, are you ever surprised at how many there are?
Yeah, it's so interesting that you mentioned that, because I've been working at HTC since 2018. And every year we select six neighborhood groups. And sometimes I keep thinking, okay, at some point we're going to run out of groups, run out of neighborhoods. But every single year we're surprised by all the community groups from every corner of the city and the uniqueness that they offer. So I'm always surprised by that. But there's so much new.
Yeah, by the volume of it. Listen, man, come up here to the Bronx. I could show you six every year here that we in our 62 neighborhoods. Diana, for you, you are a member of the Bronx Park East Community Association. Before we're going to look at some pictures and we'll put it on the record why Bronx Park East was selected. But tell me what is special about the neighborhood. Why is it special to you, and what made you and your colleagues say to Diego and his colleagues, we ought to be recognized?
Well, I think that it's a neighborhood that has people who've lived here for decades, for their whole lives. And it also is a neighborhood filled with newcomers. And we applied really because the wonderful Nilka Martel of Loving the Bronx, called me and said, Diana, there's a wonderful grant that you have to apply for. I'm sure that you have something that would fit this. She didn't know, she wasn't thinking in particular of the Allerton Coops, but that's what immediately came to mind for me. And I think one of the wonderful things about it is that there are people who really want to know a lot more about the neighborhood and its history. And, for instance, we have an original farmhouse here. We have a abandoned marble bandstand that used to be part of the botanical gardens. There's a lot of history here that people don't know and want to know more about.
What was really interesting to me is, and because many of the neighborhoods have people who've been here for a very long time, and this is their home, and they may even know some of the history. But when you say that, and this, of course, is in all the Bronx neighborhoods, people are coming from elsewhere, and they're new neighbors, they're new residents of the community, and they want to know the history, and it makes them feel good and more secure. I'm living in a place that has some value, right? So there's really something in that. So can we just start now? Diego had sent us photos, And I want to just show some of the things. Let's show this first one. I didn't know what this is, but you may have just defined it. So Anderson, let's roll this first one in here. I guess there's a little delay there. There it is.
Yes, that's the abandoned bandstand that now is in Bronx Park, right beside the Bronx River Parkway. But I learned from one of my fellow board members that it was actually part of the Botanical Gardens at one point before the Bronx River Parkway.
So wait, is that the Bronx River Parkway on that runs in front of it? Is that what that is?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it's in that.
Over
It's in that.
years,
Yeah.
so many people have said, "Well, we don't know what this is, but we'd love to have it restored. It's such a wonderful."
Well, that's a good start. Diego, does this process, you had mentioned grants, does this, is there a ton of money in this, or is this the kind of thing that can begin the process of raising money to either restore it or do something historic with it?
So for the Six to Celebrate program, we offer 1,000 grants that can be used for the group, and they can use it in any way they want in terms of preservation. And we're always very broad in terms of what this grant qualifies for. In the past, we've had people use this grant for redesigning a website, hiring a researcher, hiring a historian.
Yeah, and I think so that becomes the seed money to do something with that.
Right.
For example, because how long, Diana, do you know how long that's been there? How old that structure is?
It must be
It's got to
from,
be the
I don't
1900s,
know.
1920s. I don't know. I don't want to speculate.
And maybe even earlier than that,
Wow.
maybe the late 1800s.
But we don't want to run out of time. Let's see some more pictures here. Anderson's got some. Okay, now what is this?
That's one of the inner courtyards. And you can kind of see in the middle of a lot of the courtyards, they have statues or structures or little displays. And unfortunately, it's really kind of in a state of disrepair. So you see that the scaffolding is up all around.
The scaffolding's up all over the city. We get that.
Yeah. But
that's another whole story. But so that's the kind of building, of the housing project, whatever you want to call it, that could use preservation, but could use the designation to say, wow, this is something worth preserving. I mean, that's really what Diego's telling us.
The HDC said that there are ways that they can assist the owner in applying for grants and subsidies.
Right. Some of them may be, in this case,
maintenance.
private property or something like that.
Right.
All right, let's do another one. Let's take a look.
And that's another courtyard view. It goes straight out where it opens on the left. You could see the opening. It opens out onto Bronx Park East, and Bronx Park is right in front.
Listen, I got to tell you, look, Anderson, put that up again. Look at the architecture at the top of that building. Boy, if we create buildings like this, our communities would be even more beautiful than they are. That absolutely needs to be preserved, and it gives the neighborhood character. I mean, let's face it. I mean, that is what makes so much of the Bronx what it is, as far as I'm concerned.
Right, it's one of the castles of the Bronx.
There you go. One of our many castles. All right, let's keep going. Now, this I like because you could see the entranceway is just in plain Bronx language, freaking gorgeous.
Right.
I mean, it's just beautiful.
And there are many, many entranceways because it's built around courtyards with individual entrances, and then maybe 2 or 3 apartments and walk up. And one of the people that we're really going to rely on a lot is Janice Walcott, who's a local leader. She's also on the community board. And she's lived there since the 1970s and been a tenant leader there, and even led a rent strike there.
Wow. So there's not only infrastructure history, there's social history there as well. That's pretty cool. But again, these structures absolutely need to be preserved. I mean, we talked about Parkchester in the past, and they had those beautiful statuettes that were on the side of the building, and some of them were coming down. We just can't let any of that stuff happen. I mean, because this is who we are. This makes up who we are. I think we have one more. Do we have one more picture, Anderson? Here we go. Here's another courtyard.
Mhm.
Is this the same one or something different?
I think that's a different one, but a similar view looking, I think, towards the park. But you'll also see that there's so many plantings there and trees and shrubs. And that's another thing that we wanted to look into is how to get help with the gardening, the grant, planting.
Right now,
More
is that privately owned? Do we know?
Yes, it is.
So again, that has to be a coordination with the property owner as well. I mean that's all part of it. I guess, Diego, you come up upon that sort of thing often, where you want to preserve something, but you've got to negotiate with a
Right.
property owner.
Yeah, having the owner's support and consent is always very helpful, but it's not required for landmark designation.
Well, I understand that, but this is where we got to go to kind of get the interest in preserving it. We're just about out of time. Diego, I know there's a celebration for it coming up. The 6th to celebrate. You do it once a year, right? I guess you investigate beginning in January and then figure it out for the spring.
So for the 6 to Celebrate program, we start accepting applications usually at the end of the year, December and January, and then we work throughout the year with these groups. But when the year ends, it doesn't mean that we're going to stop talking to these groups. We're going to continue working with them, and we're going to continue supporting them. So it's a new relationship that it's critical.
Listen, it is really something to celebrate. Diana, congratulations.
Thank you.
One of my neighbors in the Bronx, Diana Finch, thank you so much. A board
You're
member of the
welcome.
Bronx Park
Gary,
East Community Association.
Can I make an invitation for?
Make an invitation.
Yes. So as you know, Gary, we do a lot of programs in the Bronx.
Okay.
We have 2 upcoming walking tours in June in the
Oh,
Bronx.
yes.
One is going to be in June 1st, and it's going to be about Morrisania. We're
Okay.
going to be talking about music and the Latin.
Some of the old
heritage.
theaters. We do got to move on. And then the other one I know is going to be near the Cross Bronx
Yeah, it's going to be
Expressway.
on June 22. So if anyone is interested, go to our website, hdc.org, and get in touch.
And get it. Listen, Diego, thank you so much. I mean, I just think it's so important. And Diana, great. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank
Let's
you, Gary.
celebrate Bronx Park East. That's what we're going to
Yes.
do. All right. That will do it for this evening, the Bronx Buzz. We thank Holly from City and State New York, and we thank these folks from Historic Districts Council and Bronx Park East. Congratulations. It is something to celebrate. And, if the curtain don't fall and the creek don't rise, so I'll be here next week. Good night.